What's up YouTube, it's your boy Kenan G, and in today's video we're going to talk about my journey on how I became a software engineer. So to kick things off, we're first going to go into what I learned in college, then we're going to go into some of the companies I work for, which give you guys a brief overview of that. I work for USPS, I also work for St. Jude Research Hospital, then I left there and I worked for a mobile agency, and at that mobile agency I worked on a couple of apps, worked on NBA, JetBlue, as well as March Madness, and then after I left that company, I worked at Carvana, and currently I work at Park Mobile. So that's kind of give you guys a brief overview of what we'll be going into in this video. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button below, hit the like button also if you like the content I'm bringing you guys. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. So to start off, I did graduate from college. I went to the University of Memphis and I studied engineering technology. Now, when I first got to college, I started off in mechanical engineering, and the only reason I chose mechanical engineering, honestly, is because my cousin is a mechanical engineer and she's living nice as a mechanical engineer. So for me, I decided like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and do mechanical engineering as well, which that didn't work out for me. Honestly, I didn't even like it. I was in it for about a year and I just felt like, yeah, this isn't for me. Got out of there, went into computer science, actually fell in love with computer science, but I had a horrible professor around the second year of computer science, to the point where it was almost like impossible for me to pass the classes. So I ended up talking to one of the professors in the Herf College of Engineering at the U of M, and me and him had a long convo around, what I wanted for my career, because I kind of felt like for a while I was just choosing majors that just worked. He told me that he felt like I was really, really bright, but I need to really focus in on what I honestly wanted. And I wanted engineering and programming. I wanted to do both, but I didn't see a major that kind of gave me both. So he told me to try out engineering technology, where I could pick two concentrations. So I picked software design and automation and robotics. Best decision I made out of my whole time at the U of M. Decided to do that, grades shot through the roof. Everything was phenomenal as I went through college, going into that major. I did have some difficult classes, and in those classes you're still, going to be learning the basic things that you normally will learn in engineering, just not so much in depth as far as some of the theory, but you still need to understand how the theory works and a brief overview of the theory. Same thing from the computer science side. You're not going to go into so much of deep dive into the theory, but you are going to get a brief overview of the theory. So you're still going to learn about, what is a stack, a queue, tree, linked list, little stuff like that, but you're not going to go deep into the theory. Before I graduated, ended up getting an internship, which I was happy about, because before, I just couldn't get an internship. Number one, my grades weren't there. Two, I was already working, so I was working in college because I pretty much had to, didn't have a choice. So me working in college, I wasn't able to it was hard to try to get my grades to the point where I was satisfied, especially trying to keep it around a 3.5 or so. That was just not happening. So I ended up getting an internship, interned at the Postal Service, which is USPS for those who don't know. Interned there. When I got there, they asked me to work on a project they had in mind where they had a bunch of data, but they wanted the data to be shown in some charts, because they wanted to be able to see when things were at its peak, when they was having issues throughout the day, different stuff like that. And it was going to assist people who worked in the facilities. I guess you say my job as an intern. I built that out, did a great job on it. They liked it so much, they actually gave me a full-time offer before I graduated. So I took the offer. I still went through school and I ended up finishing, but I just went part-time. And honestly, that was the smartest decision I made, because a lot of people kind of felt as though I should just finish school first and then gone back and try to work for the company. But I learned 10 times more working than I did honestly in school. Not to say I didn't learn anything in school, I did, but the biggest thing is me going ahead and getting myself prepared for work and working on actual projects. It was like night and day. Number one is because for me at the time, I was a full stack developer. So the back end was in MySQL or Oracle. The middleware was in ColdFusion. The front end, we used JavaScript as well as HTML and CSS. And we also used AngularJS. Also, this is before Git was like a big thing back then. So at that time, I was using Subversion, which if you're really new to programming, just go look up what is Subversion. Try to see if you can do it yourself. it's a nightmare to like tar files and knowing what files had changes and so forth. It's not easy. So me learning all those things, working a job, it was nowhere in comparison to being in school and you're working on like a small project that your professor gives you, or one assignment which, you know, you have to build out a class and do certain things, or, you know, show some data. Like it just wasn't the same. That's the best way I can explain it. It just wasn't the same. So honestly, when I got hired at the Postal Service, like I had to study, like seriously, I had to go get some books. I had to sit down, go get some courses that I could find and learn as much as I could, because I honestly felt like I was very much so behind the 8 ball, if that makes any sense. I was just behind pretty much. You know, me being behind, I had to catch up. There was no way around it. So I talked to some of my coworkers, asked them, you know, what were some things they recommended for me. And the one thing a guy named Tanner told me to do, which is the number one thing I hate that most people don't do nowadays, is work on your own personal projects and build them out as if you're going to hand them over to a company. Sounds silly, but just being real with you guys, that was the one thing that helped traject my skills like through the roof. So what I did was I found a course on iOS development, because I wanted to build games, because the guy Tanner, he was building his own gaming engine. So that tells you a lot right there. So he was working his own gaming engine. I just wanted to build games for mobile apps. So decided to pick up a course by DevSlopes, and picked up this course. And it really wasn't going to go over deep into game development, but it was going to teach me iOS development, which is what I needed. So this is when Swift.1 came out. So I ended up learning Swift, and then I went back and learned Objective-C. But when in the process of learning Swift and going through this course, he taught me, the guy Mark Price, who's on DevSlopes, he taught me everything I needed to know, from the basic things that I didn't like pay attention to when I was in school, like when do you use a class versus a struct, dependency injection, getting a clear understanding of when to use enums, making sure you have data encapsulation, different things like that I just didn't honestly know about. And I didn't see those things fully until I started like implementing them in my own projects, and then it like all clicked. And then even more so it clicked when I was able to transfer that knowledge I learned from iOS development into actual work. And when I transferred it over into work, the tickets I worked on were much, much better. I had a much easier time picking up tickets. Like I didn't feel, before I felt like if I picked up a ticket, I was nervous to work on it because I didn't know the ins and outs of around, you know, what would be hard, what's easy. Because when you work for a company, if you've never worked with one before, what may seem super easy may be extremely complicated. And it may be something as simple as, I don't know, you thinking like, oh, you know, just change this font or change this text or just change this little thing. You know, if you're working on a super large project, changing that one small thing could impact the whole application overall. So it may not be as trivial as you may think. But I fell in love with iOS development to the point where I didn't want to do full stack development anymore. I did like full stack development, but I hated front end development. I didn't like doing HTML nor CSS. I feel like JavaScript at that time was a very, very weird language, just being real, because it's not like it is today. So I didn't really care for JavaScript too much. I had to go get a book. I think it's called the Elements of JavaScript. I'll put the name of the book up here. But there was a JavaScript book I read, which ended up helping me learn JavaScript. And yeah, I just got out of full stack development, went into iOS development, left the Postal Service and went to St. Jude. After I graduated, I went ahead and started looking around for other companies. 2 companies I interviewed for. One was St. Jude, the other one was Google. I didn't get hired at Google. It's a whole nother story I get into in another video on what went on with me trying to work at Google. But I ended up going with St. Jude. After I got on at St. Jude, did a great job there. Took an application that they had in Objective-C, rewrote it in Swift. Did some front-end work for them as well. Left there. Then I eventually wanted to go to Atlanta because, just being real, mobile development wasn't big back then. Well, it was, but it wasn't. For sure in Memphis, like no one was doing mobile development at all. No Android, no iOS. Heck, it was even hard to find somebody who was doing PhoneGap at the time. And that was way before React Native and everything else. So told my girlfriend at the time, which ended up being my wife now, that, you know, to get my skills to the level I want them to be, as well as to work on the projects I was passionate about, I would have to go to Atlanta. Thankfully, she was super supportive of that. So went to Atlanta, and when I got to Atlanta, I took a contract to hire position. The contract to hire didn't work, but the other company I ended up working with was like the blessing in disguise. So worked for this company. I won't give their name, but there was a mobile agency at the time. They're still around. And the projects I worked on there were the NBA app. I worked on JetBlue. I worked on March Madness and a couple other smaller apps. But the big one I worked on the most was the NBA app. I worked on that app for about 2 years. And then working on that app, we had about, I want to say around 12 or 13 iOS developers just on that app alone. And then we also have about the same amount, 12 or 13 Android developers that worked on that app. And working on that app, learned a ton, like a whole lot. Learned about architecture, learned so much around just iOS development in general, like things you're not gonna find in a tutorial. I hate to say it, but you're just not. So those are some of the things I want to kind of bring to you guys later down the line. But yeah, my skills went through the roof there. Also at that time, I was freelancing, so I was learning even more doing some freelance work on the side. I did stop freelancing just because of the fact that, you know, working with clients is pretty hard to, you know, handle work as well as client work and just having a balanced life. Like I was losing my mind trying to balance all of that at one time. Plus at that time I was also getting married. So yeah, that didn't work out too well. So worked for the mobile agency for pretty much about 3 years. Left there, went to Carvana. When I went to Carvana, had a great experience there. Was there for about right at 2 years. And I left Carvana and went over to where I work at now, which is Park Mobile. And for me working at Park Mobile, I've enjoyed being there. I love it there. It's a great company. But the biggest thing I want to bring to you guys is that, you know, what I went through to get to where I am today, it was a lot of hard work. I think too many times people just think that, you know, you just sit down, go through a course, learn programming, and then like that's it. From that point, you don't have to study anymore. And I hate to tell you, but that's just sadly not the case. I went through a whole lot of studying. And obviously from you guys listening to what I'm saying, you know, I did freelance work. So I was coding practically twice a day. If it wasn't freelance, it was just stuff for work. And if it wasn't that, I was working on a personal project. So for anybody out there that's struggling right now with programming, you know, get yourself some books like Clean Code, sit down, practice on projects, find courses that you like, where the instructor is interesting. Because I found some instructors that I was like, bro, I'm not finna listen to this guy. This is like super dry. So find some courses you like, network with people. That's what I did. I tried to find people that were good in iOS development, although they were in, you know, different cities or so forth. I just still try to communicate with them. I use LinkedIn heavily. I use meetup.com a lot. Went to the meetup for iOS. And if you have one in your city, please go to them. It's super beneficial. And yeah, you know, before I knew it, you know, I was a senior engineer like I am now. So that's pretty much my journey. And as a black guy being in tech, you know, it was difficult. There were a lot of people that at times, you know, they looked at me and thought like, you know, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, or he's not as good as we think he is just because of his resume. And I am thankful for the fact that the companies that I did work for, they loved the work that I gave. I did a phenomenal job at each company I worked for. And I left a mark in which they all told me if I ever wanted to come back, like I can always do that. So that's something also to pay attention to. Make sure you leave a mark on whatever company you work for and do the best that you can while you're there. With that being said, I just want to thank you guys for watching the video. Hit the like button if you like the content I bring you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.